Okay. Good morning or afternoon, depending where you are. Welcome to today's web seminar entitled The 3 Rights of Workforce Optimization, Finding the Right Technician at the Right Place at the Right Time. I'm Nicole Sanders, and I'll be running the technical side of today's webinar. So just to cover the agenda for today, we'll have 3 parts to our webinar. First, we're happy to have with us Sumer Dutta from Aberdeen Group. Sumer is a research director in the service management practice for Aberdeen Group. He researches and examines how service and manufacturing executives are utilizing technology and streamlining business practices to improve post-sale service and support processes. He does a lot of benchmarking and analysis, which he'll be covering today. And he examines how best-in-class service organizations are re-engineering their service chains for optimum performance and increased profitability. So if there's anyone that really understands today's topic, he's definitely the one. So welcome, Sumer. After Sumer, Stacy Epstein, the Vice President of Marketing for ServiceMax, will give a brief overview of ServiceMax and our solutions. And following Stacy, Mike Sherman, our solution consultant, will provide a demonstration of scheduling and workforce optimization solutions from ServiceMax. So right now, you are logged into GoToMeeting. You should see the opening slide, which has the Aberdeen Group logo and says Field Workforce Optimization. You can send questions at any time during the presentation. We'll be addressing those at the end. You can do that on the toolbar, which is on the right-hand corner of your screen. And as I said, we'll be moderating Q&A at the end of the presentation. So to hide the panel during the presentation, though, click on the arrows on the top left-hand side of the toolbar. That makes sure you can see the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Sumer to get us started.
All right. Thanks, Nicole, and thanks for having me on the webinar. Good day to all of you, and happy holidays for everyone joining in. As Nicole mentioned, I'm Sumer Dutta. I'm the Research Director at Aberdeen Service Practice, and one of the areas of coverage for me personally, and has been over the last 6 years at Aberdeen, has been the field service space. So I'm always very, very happy to share insights and data around field service workforce management and field service mobility. So I do want to thank the folks at ServiceMax for having me on and share some of the data that we've captured. Over the next 25 minutes, I will cover a very, very brief introduction to Aberdeen and our field service research and our service management practice. And I'll spend most of the time on the key findings and trends around workforce optimization and really talking about the 3 rights, essentially the right technician, the right place, and the right time, and how organizations, especially those that are best in class, are able to coordinate all of those and essentially ensure that the right technician is at the right place at the right time. And if you will, with the right customer and the right part, you can make that 5 R's as well. But we'll start with 3 and gradually build up to the 5. I'll end with some best practices and recommendations before I hand it over to Stacy for the next portion of the webinar. Most of you, I believe, are familiar with Aberdeen. If you've listened in on past webinars or talked about field service research, I think we're one of the prominent research teams around the field service space. We are one part, so I'm part of the service management group, which is one part of many different groups within Aberdeen. You can see all the different areas that we research. What's important to talk about our research is everything is survey-based, and we like to think that as opposed to being the know-it-alls, where they're the find-it-alls in terms of finding out the information. And so we had developed surveys for each particular project around field service. We launched that to our community, which is about 20,000 strong service executives, to really understand what they're facing, what kinds of pressures they're facing, what kind of strategic actions they're taking, and how essentially they're moving their service businesses or their field service businesses forward. You know, we also cover, in addition to field service, some of the customer care side of the business, and obviously there's a greater level of collaboration across those moving forward. We also couch most of our research through the lens, essentially, of the best-in-class companies, and best-in-class is determined through survey data. And in each one of our surveys, we ask KPIs, we collect the data, the top 20% of performers across, so specifically for field service, around things such as workforce utilization, retention, productivity, or revenue, the top 20% of performers are best in class. And then we go through and look through the issue of workforce optimization or field service through the lens of the best in class, essentially to help in the development of a roadmap to best in class performance. So you'll see the top 20% of performers are best in class, and you can see there's the middle 50% to our industry average and bottom 30% are laggards. And then we help companies understand what are the key market pressures that these organizations are facing and what steps in terms of actions, capabilities, and enablers in the sense of technology that these companies are utilizing to drive away market pressures and deliver best-in-class performance. If there are any other questions around the frameworks that we use and our research model, I'd be glad to answer questions at the end of the session. So this year we've done 2 specific projects around field service. So we did 2 reports, and the reason they were broken up was just because we had so many questions to ask. We had to break them up. We talked about workforce management in a January project, and then we added on to it through a mobility piece in the June timeframe. And really the way those reports were structured was the first one talked about the back end of the service organization from a scheduling, dispatch, planning, workforce management piece. And the second one talked about the front end being the mobility piece. They both go hand in hand, and it's obviously very important for those 2 organizations to be tightly integrated. But just for the purpose of our research, we split those into 2 projects, and you'll see information from both projects today. There were more than 300 organizations polled for this across various industries and geographies. And before I waste too much time introducing the research, I'll actually get to the research. So I talk about market pressures, and I don't think this comes as any surprise to most people. You look at the top 4, if you will, or maybe the top 3. The 4th one might be a little bit of a surprise. But in understanding what are the biggest pressures for organizations to drive field service performance, the need for better productivity and utilization internally, and I'll comment on that on the next slide, but really driving more from your current resource base is becoming very, very important, and that's what makes the optimization essentially a lot more important. That is in response to customer demands for better service, whether it's faster service, more efficient service, service on time. All of those elements are becoming very important, and that's sort of an external customer demand. And internally, organizations are pushing up and saying we can no longer look at service as just something that's a pure cost, and it's not just a cost-cutting enterprise, but a place where we actually want our field service organization to be driving revenues for the business. And you can see 53% of organizations consider that to be a big market pressure. Something that we've seen towards the end, and we're seeing more and more of a trend in service, is the need for differentiation, essentially, as there's more and more competition, not only within the product space, but also within service. We see actually in some state of service type of research we're doing, that's one of the biggest pressures that we're seeing facing businesses, is that there's more and more competition in service from a pricing perspective, and there's need for better differentiation, so the need to drive better customer service and loyalty when you're further entrenched into the minds of your customer, and that's being placed on the field service organization. So to just comment on the productivity and utilization piece, there's always talk of how self-service and remote service technology is actually driving down dispatch volume. And I think that there is a certain incidence of that occurring depending on the type of asset being serviced, the type of industry. But overall, from our research base, we found that actually dispatch volume has gone up. And this is in 2011 in comparison to 5 years ago. You see there's been a near 6.5% increase in dispatch volume, 5% increase versus 3 years ago, and a near 4% increase in the total number of dispatches done by service organizations over the last 12 months. And so, there is obviously that need to continue to meet more and more customer demands, customer expectations, and dispatches for service. Now, what this is not being matched with is an increase in hiring. So we're not seeing significant investments, and we haven't seen in the previous 12 months an investment in field workforce hiring. Neither have we seen this on the dispatch side of the business. And looking out in the next 12 months, we still don't see a very significant uptake in hiring. I think people are, still the economy is still top of mind. Economic conditions, economic volatility is still top of mind. And so we don't see a significant uptick in hiring. We still see it will probably be in the 1% to 3% range over the next 12 months. And that's through research that we've done. So therefore, the real impetus is on these organizations to drive more with current level of resources. And another way to sort of kind of reveal the problem is when we look at all of the respondents, the 300 plus respondents who take our surveys, and just look at what they're returning from a productivity perspective, so work orders completed daily per worker. Again, this is across industry, so this might be low for some or high for some. We see that's at about 3. That's not something, an absolute number like that doesn't really, provide us with a trend or anything else. You talk about the miles driven is about 70 per worker per day. But what really kind of reveals the opportunity for improvement is the average utilization rate of field workers. And that's in the, for all organizations that we poll is at about the 63% level mark. So essentially what that means is for, a third of the time available, these workers are idle and not actually, turning wrenches or conducting work, which is one of the biggest problems and issues in terms of the service industry is driving that level of utilization. So there is that bigger market pressure and that internal need for these businesses to improve utilization. So really that's the number one pressure, the number one task. And, in my answer in terms of how do we improve and work on utilization, is it requires a little bit of a definition or redefinition, if you will, of workforce management, and specifically aimed at finding or achieving the 3 R's, so the right technician, the right place, the right time. A lot of utilization and productivity numbers are obviously impacted by having that technician in place with the right parts, with the right information, so that they can actually repair a product or an asset or attend to a customer issue on that first visit basis. And if they're not able to do so, they're definitely not the right technician. It's also about getting them to the right place, which brings into fact some of the route optimization, some of the navigation capabilities. And it's also about the knowledge piece. It's really about, it's not only just providing them with the tools, but do they actually have the right knowledge? And so we'll talk about some of the frameworks that get to this newer workforce management paradigm that I'm talking about, and especially the paradigm that the best-in-class companies are relying on more and more. I think this paradigm actually breaks into 3 areas. I think one is the tactical, execution-oriented day-to-day scheduling and dispatch. And we can see from an assessment perspective, you see organizations are, if 1 were poor and 5 were excellent on a scale, we see organizations that are saying that, they're fairly average in terms of their abilities to not only schedule their own technicians and their own field workers, but also third-party technicians as well. And we know about 20% or thereabouts of work is actually managed by third parties, so that becomes a very significant criteria as well. The other piece about capturing and sharing information and integrating that with the back end, you see this is obviously a below average score from an assessment perspective. So scheduling was piece 1. What I consider to be piece 2 is planning. And I think this is something that's very, very underutilized within businesses nowadays, is sort of forecasting the demand moving outwards and planning for it and essentially allocating your resources effectively. So there's a scheduling and day-to-day execution piece that can probably fill in some of the gaps that you face from a workforce perspective. But overall, you can really improve your utilization processes by better planning, better forecasting of demand. And as you can see, organizations aren't doing a very good job of that from a field service perspective. The last piece, and something that's been that's becoming really a lot, that's coming to the forefront a lot more, and we've seen this at our strategic service type of research as well as at our Chief Service Officer Summit, is this push on workforce management from what's traditionally been seen to mean more as a human capital type of endeavor, if you will. Things such as, retention of workers, the training of workers, the proper onboarding of workers, all the elements where it's not just a skills-based assessment, it's really about bringing in the right workers in place, training them up, getting them up to speed, providing them with the right information, and even more and more talk about providing them with incentives to drive field service goals. We see a big push from organizations towards this, and I consider that to be the third piece of the pie after scheduling, planning, and this is sort of the workforce management element. So to show how best-in-class are kind of focusing on each one of these, I want to introduce the best-in-class, at least what we consider to be the best-in-class in our field service research. And here are the results from the metrics that we use to tabulate best-in-class. So meeting response and completion times, you see the best-in-class at about 90%. Obviously still room for improvement, so it's not perfect, but best-in-class. You see it's about 74% for all others. Workforce utilization, again, it's only about 3/4 or 75% for the best in class and still room for improvement. And then retention for the best in class is 90% plus, which is always where we see those organizations. Now, what this is showing is that, there still is that room for improvement. These are the metrics that are in response to the pressures from a customer facing, from an internal pressures, as well as from a workforce perspective. We also sort of reward organizations in terms of forward and progress in terms of the key metrics over the last 12 months. So you can see the best in class is seeing an 11% improvement in service revenue over the last 12 months as compared to a 6% for all others. And the reason for this outperformance along the 3 parameters of workforce management, that's what I'm going to get into over the next couple of slides. So from a scheduling perspective, often there's sort of a misnomer, if you will, that the way to improve scheduling is just by improving the frequency or just becoming fully optimized from a scheduling front. Now, I think there's a piece to that, and then obviously if you look at this slide, the best in class from a development of schedules are a lot more frequent, if you will, a lot more optimized in their development of schedules. And I think that's one piece of the scheduling pie. So you can see 40% of the best in class do something that's fully optimized from a scheduling perspective. So as the work orders are coming in, they are scheduled based on certain criteria. And you can see on the lower end of the scale, you can see something that's like once daily or once every 2 to 3 days or once a week. You can see that the all other organizations are slightly ahead. So from a frequency perspective, we see the best in class a little bit ahead of all other organizations. I think what's equally important or very vital in terms of the scheduling aspect is what are the criteria that are used to develop these, whether it's fully optimized from an algorithm or it's something that's done once a day. What sort of criteria raise to the top? And I think quite often what we find in sort of the non-best-in-class organizations is it's just tied to bullet point 4, which is location or proximity to site. What gets missed out are things such as technician qualifications, technician skill sets, obviously capacity. Those are the areas where we see the best-in-class focus a lot more. Actually, the point right below location, which is SLA level or parts availability, those are areas we found sort of all other organizations, only about 10 to 15% of them are focused on inputting those parameters into their scheduling software, their scheduling tools. You can see the best-in-class a lot more focused on that. You talk about parts from a field service perspective. I mean, as Aberdeen, we see a bigger convergence between the people and parts side of the business, and I think that's a theme and a trend that we're going to go with for the next 12 months. But when we asked organizations from an efficiency perspective, at least from a first-time fix perspective, why is a service request not completed, field service request not completed on a first visit? And you can see the number one reason for that is no part available, or in some instances it's the wrong part available. Now that has a significant impact on the customer side of the business. Obviously they're facing an asset product that's not working. It has a significant impact on the technician because he's got to go out to the site, do a service ticket that is not completed, so he has to go back, so there's no productivity gain there, utilization gain. There's time wasted, the opportunity cost, he could have been doing something else. And there's obviously the cost of the parts as well, because if you don't have visibility into the right part, that means the technician is carrying those parts. They're actually in trunk stock somewhere. They aren't being returned appropriately, and there's a significant amount of parts inventory that's in the truck. So, it becomes a very important piece to have that into the overall scheduling engine. Is it parts availability? Is it the right part, and having diagnosis to get that part out there? So beyond looking at sort of the creation of the schedule, it's also the delivery of schedule, and that's where the sort of the field service, the mobility piece comes into play. So the best-in-class organizations, again, they're more likely to frequently create these schedules, but they also deliver these to their workers either during current tasks or immediately upon completion of a preceding task. And you can see 51% of the best-in-class are focused on that. Or they do it to fixed points throughout the day or beginning of the day, which is slightly more relied upon by all others of the non-best-in-class organizations. Actually, if we build this list, we'll also see things such as once a week, once a couple of times a week be sort of more of the mode of operation for all other organizations. You can see that the best-in-class are really relying on providing information to their field workers in a more frequent manner, and that runs into the provision of mobile applications for service workers to access their information. The last thing, from a scheduling perspective, at least from an organizational point of view, there's a debate between, do we need to rely on centralized scheduling or regional scheduling? We see the move for the best-in-class move towards the centralized focus on scheduling. That means the dispatch or the scheduling organization is centralized. The technicians are still regional, but the scheduling occurs on a central perspective. We also see service organizations take more and more responsibility for the best-in-class for the scheduling of that third party. So they actually are delivering the tasks and the jobs to that third party. That becomes more and more important. And then eventually how this feeds into planning is, using the efficacy essentially of your scheduling and the performance data to continuously evaluate and reposition the scheduling criteria. So if your technicians continue to deliver but are facing sort of a parts shortage, then that parts element needs to become more of a priority from a scheduling perspective. So you see that focus from best-in-class from an organizational level. So quickly touch upon the planning elements of that sort of really, I believe, supercharges the scheduling piece. As planning is more the strategic element, scheduling is more day-to-day execution. This talks about the percentage of organizations or service organizations that basically go through demand forecasts and resource plans for their service business. And you can see between the best-in-class and all others, especially the best-in-class and the laggers, there's a significant gap. Now, again, I would like to see the best-in-class be at a lot higher level, and we anticipate when we do future research there will be more planning within the best-in-class, but there already is that gap. And you can see the reasons to plan, or the goals of planning essentially are by far to improve workforce utilization, to have not only from a day-to-day perspective, but have the right workers in the right places with the right parts and the right information to deliver that service as needed with the customer. You can see that to improve performance, improve asset uptime, provision better resources, meet contractual commitments, but you can see the number one goal of planning is essentially, or the reason to plan is to improve workforce utilization. Just to give some insight into the elements that are put into resource plans for best-in-class organizations, obviously historical trends, seasonal trends, cyclical trends, those get placed into the business. Things that we saw a little bit of a differentiation between the best-in-class, the contract commitments, the SLAs, so upcoming contractual commitments, putting those into service plans. And then obviously newer things such as product or service innovation. How does that impact your resource requirements? How does new market penetration impact? They're pretty mature, pretty far down the path for best-in-class organizations to be looking at those. Once again, it's still a lower incidence of best-in-class, but they're really looking at overall product and service goals from a planning perspective. And the last piece, as I come near the end of my allotted time, is talking about the workforce management piece. And there's probably a whole couple of webinars that we can do on this. And we've really been hearing from a number of organizations around really focusing on workforce management as it ties to, hiring, training, engagement, retention. Engagement is one of those topics that seems to be really a big buzzword, but there's really organizations that are beginning to draw a link between engagement, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, and better profitability. And we see more and more of that. We see the best-in-class are really focused on measuring these metrics a lot more frequently than they are with all others. So what this table shows you is how frequently, or what percentage of best-in-class actually measuring productivity, turnover, engagement, satisfaction on a quarterly or more frequent basis. And you can see the gap between those organizations right there. So for example, something like engagement, we still don't see a majority of best-in-class organizations monitoring that on a very frequent manner, but we definitely see that them doing a lot more than all other organizations. We also see them, organizations, so in addition to monitoring engagement, to developing processes in place to benefit or boost engagement and productivity, we also see there's a movement towards incentives beyond just productivity and profitability, but a movement towards tying in incentives for field technicians to things such as customer feedback, customer retention, as well as engagement. We don't see that here, but really helping their employees understand the goals of the business, get them aligned with the goals of the business. So if it is actually that the field technician is expected to drive revenue, enabling them to understand why that revenue piece is important and why they have to go outside of that job description to deliver that. But then also in terms of when the revenue is returned or the profitability is returned, providing incentives for field technicians around that, so variable compensation plans. And we see a lot of discussion around this and a lot of movement from organizations across industries around incentives tied to better productivity, but now more so tied to better customer satisfaction and better profitability. So what's next? How are field service organizations looking to improve? So there's a focus on scheduling, planning, and engagement, or essentially workforce management. And now for the next steps of the best-in-class, the strategic actions over the next 12 months or so are to invest in mobility, to provide technicians better information. It's really the empowerment of the technician in the field, make information available across the enterprise, better collaboration, get better visibility into assets. That's really about the optimization angle of knowing where your technicians, your assets, parts, vehicles are to drive better navigation, drive better optimization as well. And then knowledge retention from the current workforce that ties into a little bit of a macro trend around workforce dynamics and the aging workforce, if you will. So really, that sums up what I think is sort of the best practices from an optimization perspective. It's more than just, field service optimization is more than just more frequent scheduling. I think it is that to a certain extent. It is also the delivery of the schedule, the parameters of the schedule, but then also scheduling needs to be paired with better mobility, better empowerment for technicians, better planning so that you're proactively placing better technicians and parts at the right place. And then you have the workforce management piece, which directly impacts the right technician. And what I've tried to do on the slide is show how each one of these pieces impacts one of the rights that we talked about, the right technician, the right place, the right time. There's also a routing or an optimization, a route optimization piece that can be placed in there. I consider that to fall under scheduling. Obviously, mobility is an important piece of the pie. We all know that, and from not only from actually getting work order information, but it's about navigation. It's about product information, customer information, collaboration. Mobility forms sort of the cornerstone of all of that. And then we see from an organizational perspective, I think we've harped upon this point, at least if you've read our research, there needs to be service leadership that's driving all of these, because not only will that drive the scheduling piece, but it will also make sure that the planning and the engagement of the workforce management piece is in place as well. And then eventually all of that is wrapped up by better performance management and analytics, which essentially can impact your scheduling by improving your parameters, can impact your planning, obviously drive better utilization, and then eventually impact your workforce management to understand what are the steps that need to be put in place, whether it's incentives, training, better hiring, or otherwise, to drive a more managed, more engaged service workforce. So that's what I had to share today around optimization. I hope that was useful, and thanks again for ServiceMax for having me on. And with that said, I think I'll hand over the slides and control to Stacy to walk us through the next section.
Thanks very much, Samir, and that was great data. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us today. I'm going to give a really short intro to ServiceMax. We are one of the sponsors of the webinar today. And then I'm going to quickly turn it over to Mike Sherman, who is also with ServiceMax, who's going to get into a demonstration of our workforce optimization and advanced scheduling solution. So our mission at ServiceMax is to help everybody rethink field service. We want you to throw out everything you've ever thought about field service, which traditionally I think people think of field service as complex, complicated, challenging, lots of moving parts. As Samir said numerous times, getting the right people to the right place at the right time with the right parts, it can be very complex. And we are bringing the most innovative technologies, including cloud computing, mobile technology, and collaboration software to change that opinion and make what used to be very complex and complicated and turn it into a very smooth and streamlined and optimized process. What you're seeing now is an overall picture of our suite. We offer an end-to-end suite of field service solutions that are delivered in the cloud. And you'll see in the middle there, the core of our product is our installed base entitlement engine, which keeps track of all the customer contracts and commitments and entitlements. Around the center in the gray, you'll see our modules. Starting in the upper right, we have full inventory and depot repair, which goes along with parts logistics. And then going around the circle, we have work order management, advanced scheduling, and workforce optimization, which we're focusing on today.
We do also offer full mobile and offline capabilities. We have a really hot iPad app on the App Store, which has been super popular and successful. We have customer portals and partner portals. And then we offer Service Chatter, which is a service-specific collaboration engine that can really help leverage the tribal knowledge in your organization. We are built 100% native on Salesforce's platform, and we are proud to be part of their over 150,000 customers using their world-class cloud solution. And as I mentioned, we have a couple of solutions focused on scheduling, which is the topic of our webinar today. First, we have advanced scheduling, and this is a little bit more of a manual process than our workforce optimization. So it basically allows you, in a very comprehensive dispatch console, which you'll see in a minute, allows you to define your territory coverage, your product expertise, and your skills. And then it gives you visibility into the schedules of the technicians to know who's doing what real time and make changes and really optimize your scheduling, and gives you insights into the utilization and the effectiveness of your field workforce. We also offer a module called OptiMax, and this is full workforce optimization. And this is batch-based versus manual-based, and you can automate these batch-based processes at specific points in time. You can use any pre-established criteria to schedule immediately. You can do cost-based optimization. And what's really great about OptiMax is that this gives small companies the advantage of workforce optimization where they couldn't do it before. Traditionally, without a cloud-based solution, true workforce optimization was just too expensive and too complex for a smaller company to manage. And with OptiMax, that's just not the case anymore. And so that's just a quick, brief intro to ServiceMax, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike Sherman from ServiceMax, who's going to give you a more detailed demonstration of our scheduling and workforce optimization solutions.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. As Stacy had stated, ServiceMax is an end-to-end service operation application. So we manage everything from cradle to grave in relationships to work orders or jobs that are created within the system. And part of that end-to-end process is the actual assignment, scheduling, and dispatching of the right resource on a particular job. So what I'm going to do in today's brief demonstration is I'm going to walk through and show you 3 of the different scheduling types provided by the ServiceMax application. Those 3 include manual scheduling of work orders, interactive scheduling of work orders, as well as automatic scheduling of work orders. So right now, in terms of the use case demonstration that we're going to walk through, right now I'm logged in as a particular user. So I'm logged in as Mike Sherman, the dispatcher. For those of you that are familiar with Salesforce.com, as Stacy had stated, ServiceMax is 100% native on the Salesforce.com platform. So this should look very similar to, for those of you that are familiar with the Salesforce.com application. So right now, I'm logged in as Mike Sherman, the dispatcher, and I'm taking a look at Mike Sherman's configured homepage. So based upon a point-and-click configuration, we've configured the homepage to determine the information that Mike Sherman can see, the functions that he can perform, as well as some of the key performance indicators that are made available to him. So as this particular user, across the top of the screen, you can see all the variety of different functions that Mike Sherman can perform. So he could take a look at information associated to the repository of reports and dashboards made available based upon his security. Can also go in and take a look and manage different types of business rules that are going to drive assignment and scheduling of work orders based upon the different customer accounts, based upon service contracts and SLAs, as well as managing the different types of service screens. So again, all this is configurable based upon Mike Sherman's security profile. Also, what I've set up is I've configured for this particular user as a dispatcher based upon the key repository of dashboards. I've selected 3 main key performance indicators that may be important to Mike Sherman, so that very first thing in the morning when he logs in, Mike has the availability of taking a look at different types of scheduling and dispatching criteria that's important to him. Things such as being able to analyze average monthly team utilization and different efficiencies in effectivities of actually signing work orders, as well as scheduling those work orders out into the field, as well as into the bench techs in a repair center fashion. So for example, all this information in terms of the key performance indicators, focusing on scheduling and assignment of work orders, each user has the ability of drilling down into the detailed information that make up each one of these graphs. So for example, if this particular dispatcher is taking a look at a utilization rate that is a little bit below what is typical in what you would be expecting within the organization, simply by clicking on the dashboard itself, each user can drill into all the detailed information that makes up each one of the graphs. And so, for example, I'm going out and seeing the monthly utilization rate of each one of my team members. And then, again, I can drill in and see more of the detailed information in a graphical format based upon the utilization rate for this particular service team. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to continue on with the use case. And the use case is, as a dispatcher, I have a work order that's been created, and at this point in time, the work order has not been assigned and it has not been scheduled. So I want to show you some of the different criteria that ServiceMax is going to use to enable and assist the dispatchers, or even the technicians for that matter, of actually assigning work orders and scheduling work orders within the ServiceMax application. So at this point in time, I'm going to simply click on a particular work order, and this is going to bring me up the detailed information associated with this particular job. So right now I'm taking a look at a work order, and this happens to be a work order 633. And as I scroll down and take a look at the detailed information associated with the work order, I can see a variety of different pieces of information. So information such as who's the customer account that's associated with the work order, and also important information such as contact information associated with this particular job. But then also, ServiceMax, through configurable fields on the work order, you can specify different criteria that's going to be used in the assignment and scheduling of the work order. Things such as, what is the priority of the work order? What type of work order is it? Is it a field service break fix situation? Maybe it's an installation or a preventative maintenance schedule. So maybe different facets of the workforce work on different types of work orders. And what's important to note is, based upon any field associated with the particular work order, that can drive how you're going to actually assign, schedule, and dispatch work orders. So again, the first panel on the work order, we're taking a look at just summary information about that particular job that needs to be performed. Additionally, within ServiceMax, we allow you to have additional panels of information, so things such as tracking data about the work order, such as, in order to perform the job, the worker or the technician needs to have the capability of having a particular skill or a group of skills, such as maybe power management or maybe another type of skill set. For example, maybe this work order is going to be done in another country, where the engineer, not only do they have to have a power management skill, but maybe they need to have a passport or a visa. So any type of skill or expertise or other type of criteria can be associated with this particular job to assist in the scheduling of the work order. Additionally, in ServiceMax, on the particular job, you have the capability of going in and specifying what is the piece of equipment that's actually being worked on, and things such as what is the service level agreement that's associated with this particular piece of equipment associated with this customer of Good Samaritan Hospital. So a combination of all this data is going to drive ServiceMax either to automatically schedule the job or give the dispatcher or the field service manager recommendation on who's the right technician with the right skill sets to actually work on this particular job. And the last thing that we want to note, also on this particular job, we can specify what is the particular service location where this job needs to be performed. So that, again, not only are we taking a look at who the customer is, but where the equipment is located, associated with the piece of equipment that's being worked on. So right now, if we scroll down further into the screen where we talk about the dispatch information, right now, if you recall, I stated that ServiceMax provides 3 different methods of scheduling work orders: manual, interactive, and automatic. So the first method that we're talking about in terms of scheduling is manual. So if I'm a dispatcher or a field service manager and I have security rights, I do have the capability at any point in time to actually go in and type in manually who is the technician that I'm assigning to this particular job. Or maybe not only do I want to assign it to a particular service technician, maybe I want to assign it to a particular team if that's the way your organization assigns a particular job. So simply by clicking in the field, I can go in and do a search, find the technician, and assign the technician on a manual basis or override that. Again, all this assuming that I have the proper security. The second method of assigning work orders is what we call interactive, or what I'm going to bring up is called our dispatch console. So in the interactive mode, what ServiceMax is going to do is it's going to bring up the dispatch console. The dispatch console is going to take all the different criteria that was associated on that particular work order. Things such as who is the customer, where is the service being performed, information such as what skill sets are required, or what is the error code. And based upon all that data associated with that work order, what it's going to do is it's going to provide the users of the ServiceMax system a recommendation on who is best suited to work on that particular job. So right now we're taking a look at the dispatch console. And the dispatch console is broken into 2 separate panels. The top panel is the work that needs to be assigned. And the bottom panel is showing me each one of my service teams and my service team schedule. And all this is based upon the security that's made available to this user, Mike Sherman. So right now, Mike Sherman has the capability of taking a look at 2 separate service teams, the East team and the Bay Area team. But then also, again, based upon my security profile, I can add on additional service teams and maybe even third-party service technicians or partners and be able to view into and collaborate with a third-party service provider as well. So a couple different things about the bottom portion of the screen. So right now I'm taking a look at my 2 service teams that I have access to, the East team and the Bay Area team. If I take a look over to the right-hand side, you'll see a number of color-coded boxes. These color-coded boxes are actually different service activities that have been assigned to each one of these service team members. And you notice they're color-coded, and these are user-definable color matrix that will allow you to specify for different types of work orders, color code each work order into a different color. So at any point in time, it's very easy for a dispatcher or even a field service manager or a technician to take a look at their screen and, based upon the color, realize the different activities they need to be performed, whether it's a work order or maybe it's a particular call or maybe email or vacation activities associated to each one of my technician schedules. And a couple things that are important about the schedule: based upon our native integration with Salesforce.com, ServiceMax provides an out-of-the-box integration, and bi-directional integration with Outlook, Lotus Notes, as well as Google Mail. So, for example, if I'm an engineer, such as Ruth Amos in this case, Ruth can go into her Outlook calendar, schedule different activities such as certification training, and by placing that in Outlook and turning that option on, it will automatically update the ServiceMax calendar with the information that was captured either in their Outlook Lotus Notes or Google Mail calendar. And then bi-directional. So for example, as a dispatcher, if I assign a certain work order by using the dispatch console and place it onto a technician's calendar, it can bi-directionally update their personal calendar on those different calendaring systems as well. And lastly, if you take a look at on the right-hand side in the bottom corner of the panel, you also see integration to Google Mail, or I'm sorry, Google Maps. It is getting close to the holidays. So with Google Maps, what ServiceMax provides you the ability of doing with the out-of-the-box integration, I have the ability of plotting on via Google Maps the ability of taking a look at where the work needs to be performed, and I can see geographically on the map where my workforce is in proximity to where the work needs to be performed. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm showing the work order that needs to be assigned, and at the bottom of the screen, I'm showing all the different service members that as a dispatcher, I have security of viewing. But now, based upon the work order criteria, I can see that it's a field service job that's being completed in the San Jose territory, and the actual piece of equipment that's being worked on is this ultrasound piece of equipment, and the technician needs to have a particular skill set of power management. So I'm going to manually, at this point in time, this could be set up with a configuration to automatically happen, but I'm going to go out and find all technicians that meet the string of criteria associated with this job. So by clicking on the Find Technician button, you notice it's going to reduce the amount of technicians that are available on the left-hand side to only the technicians that meet the criteria that was user-defined or specified for this particular user. So for example, if I enlarge this map, I can go in and I can see specifically with the red dot, this is where the work order actually needs to be performed. And then I can also see that the closest technician available to work on this particular job is Scott Techman. So by taking a look at Scott Techman's calendar, it just so happens that Scott's available. So through a drag and drop user interface, I have the ability of dragging and dropping this particular job down to this technician and assign this work order interactively to this particular technician. Now again, how does this technician get notified? A variety of different ways the technician can be notified, either by logging in to the ServiceMax application, taking a look at their own personal calendar, or through other type of notification methods such as email or maybe a page or a text for that matter. So that's the interactive method of assigning the job to a particular technician via the dispatch console. So again, in that fashion, what ServiceMax is doing is based upon all the criteria that's associated with this particular work order, it's going out and it's trying to find the technician that's in the right place at the right time with the right skill set in doing a match and allowing me to drag and drop that particular job onto that technician's calendar. So I could see at the middle portion of the screen that now Scott Techman has been assigned this job. So the last method of scheduling that I want to discuss today briefly is our automatic scheduling using the OptiMax application. So using OptiMax, it's going to use many of the different criteria that we just specified in the interactive scheduling, but then we're also going to allow us to do things such as scheduling optimization and route optimization. So again, in this fashion, what we're doing is we're setting up a series of business rules through a point-and-click user interface to allow me to set up different algorithms to go out and automatically either do immediate scheduling or batch type scheduling. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually go out and I'm going to bring up a dispatch process that's going to allow me to do a batch scheduling to optimize my schedule, which is going to actually go out and minimize costs for a certain batch of jobs that need to be scheduled and assigned to the field. So at this point in time, I'm just going to open up an OptiMax dispatch method. So in the OptiMax dispatch method, again, this is where I'm using this point-and-click user interface to set up a variety of different business rules to segment a group of work orders so that the system is going to optimize the schedule and schedule all these work orders and assign them to a group of technicians based upon user-definable criteria. So for example, you notice that there's a variety of different tabs that are set up across the top of the screen. This is where I'm able to specify how I want to group the work orders that are going to be scheduled, and then what are all the different constraints and cost factors that I wish to use to actually optimize that schedule and optimize the route. So for example, I've set up this one batch schedule to actually go out and minimize cost. So what I'm doing is I'm going out and I'm finding all my work orders that are of the type of a field service work order. So I just want to find field service work orders and throw them into a bucket of work orders that need to be scheduled. Now these could be user-definable order types. In this case it's field service, but it could also be installation, preventative maintenance, whatever the case may be. So I'm finding all my field service work orders, and then also I'm setting up user-definable territories. So I'm finding all my field service work orders that are located in the West Territory. Now what I can do is I can build up a variety of different prioritizations. So by maybe a segment of customers or an individual customers, I can set up different type of work order constraints. But now through a sliding cost factor, I can establish the different type of business rules. So within ServiceMax, in this example, I'm going out and finding all my field service work orders in the territory of the West Territory, and it's going out and I'm actually setting up criteria that's going to minimize the overall cost of this batch of work orders. So for example, things that are most important to me is minimizing my travel cost or windshield time and minimizing things such as the overtime cost. And based upon that and based upon a schedule that's going to run, it will automatically go out and optimize that schedule for all my field service work orders in the Western Territory. But right now, as Stacy had stated, you have a variety of different optimization categories, things such as overall cost, right person, right job. So all these can be set up, which will determine how you're going to actually optimize the schedule. So lastly, I just wanted to show a real quick example of an optimized schedule. So in this case, we ran the optimized schedule prior to this demonstration, and what it did was it grabbed that group of work orders and it optimized the schedule to reduce the amount of windshield time and reduce the overtime costs made available for this batch of service that needs to be performed. So at this point in time, what I'm going to do is pass it over to Stacy.
Thank you, Mike. And looks like we have about 4 minutes left for questions, and we have quite a few. So I can tell you right now, we will not be answering all of them, but we do have all your questions. So we'll email you directly and get in touch with you. First one's an easy one. Will this webinar be recorded for future playback? Yes, we will have a copy of this recording. It'll be on our website most likely by the end of this week, if not early next week. Let's see. I had another quick one that I was going to answer. Oh, this was one. I'll kind of subphrase. Can't even think of the word. Subphrase this. Someone asked if we can sell the OptiMax module separately outside of the regular ServiceMax solution. Typically, we do sell the ServiceMax solution as a suite. It is a suite of applications, and obviously one of the major advantages is that everything is integrated. Your scheduling, your parts, and your work orders are all in one central location. That being said, we do have some flexible licensing that we can discuss. So I think it's best if you just work with us directly and we can talk about your unique needs and see if there's a way we can come up with your solution. Here's a question I'm going to give to Mike. It says, does it track service by machine and specific serial number? If yes, can a history of service by serial number be run?
The answer, yeah, well said. The answer is absolutely yes. You do have the ability of linking it to a particular serialized piece of equipment. In addition, you can track failures and failure analysis down to the subassembly and subcomponent. So at any point in time, I could take a look at a unique serial number, see the service history, and then break it down to the subassemblies and components of the services bill of material as well.
Okay. All right, I have a couple that I think are targeted at Sumer. One is there a drop in productivity performance where organizations have PPM greater than 90% of activity and need to fit in break fix?
That's a great question, and any organization that's doing that much work in terms of a preventive predictive model is obviously one that's further down the path. I don't necessarily believe there's a drop in productivity, and we don't see that specifically in the data. What we tend to see is most organizations, their technician days scheduled, and obviously in this case 90% is more at the preventive level, but broken into those different elements. So it's not really a drop in productivity that would be of concern, but is it in terms of the reactive element to a break fix? Is that, will that fit your response times from an SLA or contractual perspective? So I think that would be the bigger challenge in that instance as opposed to a drop in productivity.
Great. Thanks, Sumer. Well, I think we are at the end of our hour, and we really appreciate all of you for joining us and staying with us for the duration of our presentation. Again, this will be recorded and put on the ServiceMax website. If you have questions you'd like to request of us immediately, send an email to info@servicemax.com, and we will respond to you immediately. And thank you again to Sumer for joining us today, as well as Mike Sherman. Have a great day and a great holiday.